Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Van Ostrin, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Flipping the Classroom, How to Deliver an Active Learning Experience in the Engineering Classroom, sponsored by McGraw-Hill Education and featuring James Pitarresi. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, and authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We will spend some time responding to your questions during the program, so please feel free to submit these throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. James Pitarresi is the Assistant Provost and Executive Director of the Center for Learning and Teaching and Distinguished Teaching Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Binghamton University. Prior to joining the Watson School in 1988, he was a research fellow at the National Center for Earthquake Engineering Research, where his work was in the area of structural optimization and active control of large structures. Pitarresi has worked for Bell Aerospace and General Motors and is an engineering consultant to industry and government. He is co-author of the textbook Introduction to Solid Mechanics with Irv Shames. Pitarresi has received the Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching and the University's Award for Excellence in Teaching and the Peter A. Engel Memorial Award for Outstanding Teaching in Mechanical Engineering, and he currently holds the rank of Distinguished Teaching Professor. With that, I'd like to turn things over to James.
Well, great, Jen. Thank you very much for that introduction, and a warm welcome to everybody for joining us today. And I took a quick look at the poll that you saw in the lobby, and I'm thrilled to see that many of you are familiar with flipping the classroom. So I'll look forward to your comments and questions, and hopefully my experiences with it here will be able to shed some light on some issues and some lessons learned. I also noticed that about 75% of you are using it in the classroom, somewhat moderately, about 25% or less, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And so one of the things I want to do is start off with some key educational trends. And that is a picture of me there from quite a few years ago. But the changing role of engineering educators, and this is something we talk a lot about at ASEE meetings and so forth, but this idea of knowledge transfer, the concept that we're going to somehow impart our knowledge onto the students, we're starting to realize now that it just doesn't work that way. The best we can do is provide information, and the students have to generate that knowledge. So our role is changing from this sage on the stage to more of a content guide and mentor. And we see that in a variety of ways. I mean, if you go back to the late 1960s, Keller in his famous article, Goodbye Teacher, sort of alluded to this personalized training and talked about how students learn and the pace at which they learn. And I think really started a lot of us thinking along the lines of where we're going with education. Later on in the 90s, I remember reading From Teaching to Learning, and that helped me understand the transition from teacher-focused to learner-focused. And of course, more recently, we see a lot of information on high-impact educational practices, things that we do in engineering like internships and capstone courses, undergraduate research, all fall into that category. And then lastly, what we're really talking about here is active, engaged learners, and a lot of evidence out there in the literature to support that. So what does the active classroom learning, what is it all about? It really comes down to classroom instruction that engages the students. If they're engaged in the learning process, then they're going to learn at a faster rate. They're going to retain that information. And so what it really means is meaningful learning activities for the students. In addition, that has to be backed up by thoughtful implementation by the instructor. And so some of the attributes, and I've just listed a few here, are things like, student engagement becomes the focus, and that's what I mean by active learning. but also students involved in doing meaningful work in the class. That's valuable time with our students, and we need to really use that as best we can. Of course, I prefer to leverage collaborative team-based learning, and there are various learning approaches like problem-based learning and so on and so forth. So there are a variety of ways that you can introduce active learning in the classroom. So one of the great phrases, this is from Prince in his article, it's now a decade ago, but I thought this was really great, that the activities must be designed around important outcomes and promote thoughtful engagement on part of the student. And to me, that kind of frames the whole discussion. So students need to think about what they're learning. That's really important. And our job as a faculty member, as the instructor, we're really the experts in the content and the mentors in that learning process. And we're absolutely critical as to how that works. And so how is this related to flipping the class? Well, my definition, flipping the class, it leverages all these active learning and engagement concepts to improve student learning. And it's mostly implemented in STEM lecture-based courses. That's been my experience. When I walk across campus and talk to my friends in the arts and humanities, they tell me they've been teaching flipped all along. They have these robust discussions in class, and they really eschew the large lecture. But in the STEM fields, that we've been relying on the large lecture. And to some extent, we still will have to, and I got some comments on that later on. But the key thing is to make time in class by moving some of the lecture material, outside of the classroom, and spend time in class on thoughtful, outcome-driven student exercises. And, as all ABET programs or all engineering programs go through the ABET process, we get that. We understand learning objectives and outcomes and so forth. And the question is, and I have fun with this, is like, this is a new development in teaching, right? Well, no, it isn't. This gentleman here, Colonel Thayer, was the superintendent at West Point, and he introduced early concepts of flipped teaching in 1817. So, flipped teaching is not new. It's been around for a little while. So that's kind of fun to look back at the history and realize that a lot of this is based on what I'd like to say is common sense, but it's been around for a while. Okay, so when I sit down with new instructors or seasoned instructors and developing a course, one of the things I like to do is lean on backwards design. And I got a little link here to the book, Understanding by Design, which I think is a good reference, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. But basically, you start with the end, the desired results, and then you build you build from there. You build backwards from there, right? So you try to develop the curriculum, the syllabus, and the assessments that will allow us to kind of understand, are the students learning what we want them to learn? And real quick here, I've got two columns. The traditional approach, and when I started teaching, this is the way it was done. You either picked a book or were handed a book, or a publisher's rep came by with some free samples and you chose one. You put together a syllabus. You started building lectures from the chapters. Later on, you developed PowerPoints, but in the early days, you literally wrote out those lectures. And you came up with various assessments. And this was a very much instructor-centered type approach. In backwards design, what we're doing is establishing what we want the students to know, setting up specific learning objectives, designing assessments, and then from there, developing the learning activities. So it's very much a student-centered approach. Okay, so some basics here, things I've sort of learned or put together over the years. I definitely urge you to consider, and I'm sure many of you are experienced or doing this, start with the course learning objectives and outcomes. I mean, that's really a great place to understand where you need to be. And then determine what content works best for review outside of the classroom and what works best for inside the classroom. And I'll have some comments and some material on that in just a second. And then, and this is critical, when I talk to a lot of folks that are using flipping, this part is sometimes missing. But think about how students connect that content between those two environments, the in class and the out of class. That's really important. And try to be cognizant of different learning styles and different rates and so on and so forth. Okay, and at this point, I always get the question when I run workshops on flipping is, well, what about the videos, right? So it's not about the videos, and but they are a great way to move information transfer out of the lecture. That said, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas that I've played with over the years, and it'd be interesting to get your feedback on that. But yeah, the videos are great. Procedural type information, fabulous. Stuff that you repeat over and over again. I think the videos work great for that. I try to keep things chunked and to 10 minutes or less. I mean, realistically, some of my videos get a little longer. In the early days, they were 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and my students let me know right away that was way too long. So I target 10. Some of them are 6 minutes, some of them are 12, 15 minutes, but you get a feel for whether or not it's too long. Lots of tools available to make them on a computer. Some are free, some are fancy, all kinds of stuff. In addition, there's all kinds of content out there, and leveraging that content is something to consider. And for instance, AccessEngineering has some content. And then use mini assessments with the flip material. It does two things. It allows the student to kind of self-assess and see where they're at, but also you can use it in a context that I call or others call just-in-time teaching, that allows you to kind of gauge the performance of the class. Okay, so for the out-of-class session, what I like to do is, I've got a couple of ideas here. Video and audio content, so we talked about self-made videos or third-party, so on and so forth. There are content-rich websites, a lot of the government labs and government websites, other university websites and so forth, professional societies, all kinds of great information out there. Online discussion and sharing, sort of blogs and Blackboard and so forth for sharing information. And something I've been playing with lately, just looking at virtual tours of places and online simulations and things like that. So these are some of the ideas for the out-of-class session, the so-called flipped. And so I'd like to throw up a poll question at this point, so a little bit of participation on your part would be greatly appreciated. Which ideas have you used for out-of-class assignments? And feel free to mark everything that applies. And I'll keep this up for a minute here, or not a minute, for 30 seconds, let's say. And fabulous participation. Thank you very much. And wow, you guys are fabulous. You should be given this webinar on flipping. You're using all these fabulous the sources of content. Yeah, the virtual tours and simulations, I'm seeing that's on the lower end. That's definitely something I'm interested in exploring more. But what I find interesting is most of you, well, let's see here, websites very strong, and third-party sources are very strong. So that's interesting. About half, if that's percentages, looks like about half are using your own self-created. Fabulous. So I'm going to move forward. This is great. Thank you for that. And very interesting. Okay, what about the in-class session? And this is important. This is where our value added with the students, that time, is so, I think, so very important. The classic think, pair, share is I use sometimes, to provide a question or something like that and ask students to think about it. And this is on the flip content. And then they can pair up with a classmate and exchange ideas and so forth. And something like that, I think, works well. The challenge your partner, and this is kind of fun. I've had, I use this to get exam questions and assessment questions, but I'll have the students create a question or two, and then they would pair up with the student and ask the question and sort of get a little back and forth on that. And you can play this in a variety of ways, in groups and pairs, all kinds of different things. But the real good questions, hang on to those, and they can provide the basis for some great assessments later on in the semester. This is one I lean on all the time. Basic problem solving, case study sort of thing. This is where I think the flip method really shines, especially in engineering. Tremendous case studies that can be used for going in depth with the students and having them work on things and being available to them. I think that's tremendous. And then occasionally I've done this, is have students present brief little sections of the material, have them responsible for a section and get up and give a little mini presentation. Okay, so I'd like to do another poll question, please. So which ideas have you used for the in-class assignment? So this is when the kids are in class with you. And we've got the choices there, and please click all that apply. And yeah, I'm seeing a very similar distribution to my class. The case studies and problems are really important, and the think, pair, share. Yeah, I probably do a little more of challenge, challenge your partner, and less of student presentation. I suppose it depends on the content. But excellent. So take a look at those results. That's kind of a cool distribution there. So the challenge your partner, not used a lot, but it's still up there. So we'll continue on. So what I want to do is just real quick here. Here's an example. I mean, I teach a lot of the sophomore level courses, and just walking through how I develop, a flipped content. I start with the course objectives and outcomes. In my syllabus, upon successful completion of the course, you will be able to, and I got a whole bunch of things there, ... And I happen to pick out this one. Describe mathematically the motion of a particle using, and I got a couple of different coordinate type systems there. So that's, one of the things that students need to be able to do. So I'm going to focus in on that. And then I have my textbook, and I go to the appropriate chapter in the appropriate section. Okay, what's the concept? What's the theory? How does that relate to the, the objectives and outcomes? From my experience, where might students have difficulty? What material is best to flip? And what should I use in class? So that's kind of what my thinking is for that. And then I come up with a plan. So for the flip content, I'm going to produce a couple of short videos, maybe talk about why there are these different approaches, when you might use one over another, let's say, a little bit of theoretical development, perhaps an example, right? And then build in some assessments on that. And so the assessments flow really nice into just-in-time teaching. And basically, when I give them flip content, I make sure there's a survey, a questionnaire, some kind of an assessment, a problem, something they got to work out. And I tell the students, look, if you didn't get that right, go back and review that video. And if you're still not understanding it, then absolutely come to class or office hours with questions. But I make it due definitely before class so that when I come into class, I can review the responses right during class. And what's exciting about that is I can look at trends or patterns in the responses. I can clarify misconceptions. If a lot of the class is confused over a given description or something, I might go back and revise that for the future. So when I put it all together, right, I got my flipped content, got a couple of videos for that section. They're ready to go. Got some mini assessments built into that, so I can do some just-in-time teaching, right? Review that, come into class, go over that right away. I get students into groups. I find 3 to 5 students per group, and I let them self-select. About halfway through the semester, I mix them up. One trick I like to play is if they're sitting with each other, I'll stop by the different groups and I'll ask them to name who's in their group. If they don't know the name of their group members, then I say, guys, you gotta introduce yourselves. That's how it's part of effective communication. Do any Q&A on the flip material, the just-in-time summary. And then the key are the in-class exercises, and those are carefully thought out. I like to ladder those in complexity. I like to introduce trick problems, and so they get to struggle with those tricks in class while I'm walking around and available to them. Now, here's something I do. I bring undergraduate course assistants in. They typically either volunteer or they get 1 credit, and they're available in class. Typically, they're seniors, and they're happy to review the material. And we wander around the class and circulate. The 5-foot rule is if you're within 5 feet of a student, they're more likely to ask you a question rather than shout it out across a room or something like that. So I find circulating is super important. And summarize and reflect with the class. Spend the last few minutes kind of reminding everybody, okay, what did we do today? What did you learn? Think about it. I think that's important. Okay, a couple of lessons I learned. The mini assessments on the flipped content are really important. Otherwise, the students blow it off and they come into class and they're not as prepared as they should be. Just-in-time teaching is pretty strong measure that I use to get a sense of where things are at. Quite frankly, I can tell when there's a calculus exam or a chemistry exam going on because my just-in-time assessments will be a little lower, and I can talk to the students about that. The in-class activities are critical. It's got to be active, it's got to be engaged, it's got to be connected. I mean, that's really the true value we bring to the classroom. Teams and circulate. We talked about undergraduate course assistants. Be flexible with the lesson plan. Sometimes things don't go the way you hope. Here's something that I learned. I was really emphasizing skills when I first started flipping, and I found that the students were struggling with concepts. So now I take a much more judiciously balanced approach on both the flipped and the in-class material regarding skills and concepts. And what's exciting about it, it's some of the most fun, dynamic, and enjoyable teaching that I've ever done. Class becomes almost like super office hours, and it's really fabulous. And then what I always tell people is baby steps. You don't need to flip every lecture. There are times when it makes sense to just give a lecture because you need to push out a lot of information. And, some of the common questions that often come up is, are the videos highly polished? No, for anybody who's suffered through my videos, they're not particularly highly polished. I don't spend a lot of time editing them. That said, if the production quality is low, the students are going to let you know. They're not going to watch them. So you do have to spend a little bit of time with that. And then other questions that when I've given workshops on this that often come up are examples of sort of just-in-time teaching. And it's really simple. If I'm teaching a concept or got a video on a concept, I might have a little example in there, just something what I would consider to be an easy problem. And based on the results of that, when I come into class, I can say, hey, look, 30% of you are having some trouble with this. How about, talk to me. What are the issues here? What difficulties are you having? And so I can usually spend a couple minutes at the beginning of the in-class session to address misconceptions. And then, of course, they've got problems and case studies to do, and they get a chance to practice right away. So I think that's fabulous. And typically, homework is a strange thing these days. Just about every solution manual out there, including mine, is available on the internet these days. I count homework about 10% of the total. Most of the grade for the course is based on examinations, which are designed everything from multiple choice to long answer to essay. I mean, I hit the waterfront with them. And I think that gives me a good broad assessment of where people are at. And we run workshops here at Binghamton University, and just a couple of professors, Tina Abate You know, just fun things that she's saying here. I mean, the 2-hour class goes very quickly. She rarely hears crickets when she poses a question. And this is important here. The questions that the students are asking her demonstrate a higher level of thinking. And that's fabulous. That's what we want to see. And George Holmesy also is one of our flippers. And, you know, he talks about the students being able to get practice in his presence, which is really important. And there I am up in the upper left-hand corner. And, you know, I've been teaching sophomore level engineering courses for, I think, over 30 years now. And I'm seeing a consistent 10 to 15% improvement in midterm and final exam scores. And then lastly, we're doing a really cool experiment here. We have about 1,300 students in our Calculus 1 program here at Binghamton University. And our new director of calculus, Bill Kazmierzak, has gone to a flipped approach for Calculus 1. We have 33 sections. We have about 25 instructors. We ran everyone through a 4-day boot camp this summer, got all the videos and everything produced, and you know, hopefully we'll have some good results to share with everybody at the next ASEE conference. And I got a couple minutes here. I do want to talk about some additional educational trends, just, you know, things that I see and hear and thought I'd toss in here. Look, we're going to hear more and more about open educational resources, the high cost of textbooks and so forth. But more importantly, getting students engaged in creating some of this content, I think, is very exciting. Learning analytics and big data, visualization. I've been playing with some software called Tableau, which is very promising, a very interesting way to visualize data. Digital fluency is something that I've been struggling with here on this campus. I think our students are very good at digital consumption, but they're not as strong as they need to be at digital production. And I don't mean turning them into a video production facility, but just the ability to understand and to be able to manipulate digital presentations and manage their digital footprint. Gamification, badging, simulation. Lee Sheldon up at Rensselaer Polytech is up at RPI is doing some really exciting things there. Recently saw some preliminary work on a thermodynamics game/course that he's developing with the mechanical engineering program. And then lastly, a couple of slides on purposeful design of learning spaces. We're experimenting here with learning spaces that you know, really try to encourage active learning and team-based learning. And I realize not everyone can do this at their universities and so forth, but if you get an opportunity to pilot some of this, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the results. We are doing some work right now in this learning studio, which is about 50 feet from where I'm sitting. And this is about a 30-seat classroom with some nice technology, furniture that's on wheels that can be easily moved around and so on and so forth. And we're teaching about 7 courses in there this semester, about 10 next semester. Office hours for calculus and chem are in there. And we just submitted plans to scale this concept up to a 120-seat classroom and a 116-seat lecture hall. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to report on our results there. And, you know, a couple of quick, these are cell phone photos of students in an active class. This is Professor Sharon Fellow's freshman engineering class, engineering communication. And you got students up. Yes, they are writing on the walls. That's dry erase paint on the walls. It comes off with a rag and a spritz of water. The students are standing up. They're engaged. The instructor is floating around the room answering questions. You know, here we have students working on smart boards or working on the walls. They're engaged with their learning, which is absolutely critical. And then lastly, in the file share area, whenever we do workshops, we do 8 takeaways. And so I had my instructional designers put together, 8 different ideas, just little takeaways. And this is a PDF you can download. And it's Creative Commons, so feel free to use, share, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, I'd like to give a big shout out and a big thanks to our sponsor, McGraw-Hill AccessEngineering. And, a big thanks to them for helping me put this together and supporting a lot of what we do. And you'll see down in the web links area, there's a free 2-week trial to AccessEngineering, which is a great site that has a ton of engineering books and other materials and so forth, some videos. And it's really worthwhile to take a look at. So there's a link there. There's a very long token code that you need to write down now if you want to try it immediately. But we will put that in an email and get that out to you so you'll be able to copy and paste later on. So that concludes the presentation part. What I'd like to do now is tackle some questions. And my colleague has been sending some questions over to my question box here. And so let me just pick out a few, and hopefully we'll get to as many as we can. And certainly we'll get a transcript of all your questions. And we'll be able to hopefully follow up for key questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. So one question that comes up is, what program do I use for production of videos? I happen to use the TechSmith product, Camtasia, and we have I don't want to say a site license, we have a multiple license here at our campus, which helps drive the unit cost of that product down. However, there are free products out there, and there are a variety of tools you can use. I like using Camtasia because it allows me to easily put in simple little multiple choice assessments in the middle of the video, but there are other tools out there on the web that do that right now for free. So that's what I use. So another example, another question, I'm sorry. Let's see, given the poll results, a lot of us are eager to do this. I'd love to see more details. What kind of, so I got a question on what kind of room do I use, and do students use computer or paper? This is great. So believe it or not, I now teach a flipped course with 200 students in it, and it's in a lecture hall. And it's pretty amazing to see it in action. I have a handful of undergraduate students, and typically 2 to 4 will show up per class, and these are the undergraduate course assistants, plus myself. No TAs in the class, and basically we go through that procedure I talked about. The students bring their own computers, and I let them use computers and cell phones, all that kind of stuff. I want them to get out there and access information and pull it in. And what's really exciting is they're not surfing the web and goofing off and on Facebook and stuff like that. They're actually digging up material properties or checking other websites for information. And the groups self-police themselves. They want to learn this material, and they pretty much, they're on board. I will say this. I think it's very important at the beginning of the semester to establish expectations. Expectations that the students can have of us as the instructor, but also expectations we have of them. We expect them to engage with the material, to work with their teammates in the group, to do the flipped exercises and so on and so forth. And I think if you have that honest conversation with the students and they see that this is going to help them learn, I've had just incredible response that they really certainly do enjoy that. Just looking at some other questions. Yes, so like think, pair, share, I just have them do that on paper. But I have no problem with students using computers. So another question that's coming up is, while the concept and implementation of flipping the classroom is great for students and student learning, doesn't this concept devalue professional instruction and bolster the movement of administrators to move away from full-time instructors to part-time content expert adjuncts and all that? Great question, and I am now an administrator, so I know both sides of this. I haven't seen that here on our campus. Is it happening elsewhere? Yeah, I'm from what I read in the Chronicle and so forth, I'm sure it is. There'll never be a takeaway from the value we bring to the classroom. And I think that's sort of my core belief here, and my core idea is that for a residential campus, and look, we all have online courses, we all teach online courses. I think it's absolutely critical that the students engage with the instructor, with the faculty. And, someone with my experience as a consultant and as an instructor in the classroom with my students, I think the value add I bring to that equation is enormous. And I would defy any administrator to find, a better solution than that. They might find a less expensive solution, but I don't think it's going to get them the return on investment. But this is a great question. I don't see it going that way, but certainly there are forces out there at play, and so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of years. Next question came up is how much weight in terms of grading is given to the outside class assignments as opposed to the in-class? Yeah, that's a good question. Look, everybody's got to decide where they want to balance things out. For the in-class, most of that group work is not graded. The students self-assess on that. We go over things, and so the quote-unquote correct solutions are posted later on. There's a lot of self-assessment. I really encourage the students to constantly quiz themselves, if you will, self-assess. When I do have in-class assessments, they're part of that 10%. So they're counted like another homework assignment. So the real 90% of the grade in my class is from three examinations, each worth 30%. And that's what works for me. And then another question is, what has been the process to prepare these? Do you work during the summer with a team? Yeah, that's a great question. Historically, I've developed every single thing myself, and I don't know if I'm a control freak or not, but that seems to be my mode of operation. Lately, I'm looking around and starting to leverage other resources. There are people out there that are much more experienced, more articulate than I am, and they're producing some great content. And as long as they're willing to share that content, I'm happy to leverage that. But it's best if you can get on it over the summer. I did try doing it, staying a week or two ahead of the students, and that can get stressful real fast. But once you get a lot of these, the videos and the content and the classroom content squared away, again, I come back to that earlier statement. It is the most fun I've ever had teaching. You're engaged with the students. They're learning the material. The feedback from the students is tremendous. They enjoy it, and they really sense that you're there for their learning, not just talking at them from the stage in front of the lecture hall. Great question. How do you create groups in the lecture hall? So the kids come in. The hall I teach in holds about 230, and there's about 200 in there, so there aren't a lot of empty seats. And typically students will sit with friends or sit near people, and I just tell them, hey, get together in groups of 3 or 5. Close up gaps here and there. I don't allow groups bigger than 5 because someone's not going to do the work. But I'm pretty laid back about that. And like I said, about halfway through the semester, I'll go through and actually mix up some groups. And I find that works fairly well. When colleagues come in and observe, they're shocked at how noisy and loud the classroom is. And they're also shocked at how quickly everyone quiets down when I ask them to, and we start reviewing the problems that they just looked at and kind of collectively talk about the difficulties. And, that is the part that I think new faculty are the most afraid of, is quote-unquote losing control of the class. But I have found the students are more than willing to follow you if you establish expectations up front and you work with them, you deliver on your end, they typically respond. So I've been super excited about that. Do you see guest lecturers make use of flipped classrooms, such as by librarians? Yes, teaching librarians. This is great. I'm very fortunate here to have a great relationship with our libraries here on campus. They are an active part of the Center for Learning and Teaching. One of the librarians is on my board of directors here, and so she is always keeping me abreast of what's going on. We actually had a number, and this is shame on me, but I didn't realize this, that librarians do a lot of teaching. And a lot of it is more short course or one day or a couple hour mini type courses on how to effectively do research in the library and so forth. So many of the librarians started attending our flipped workshops, and that led to this very positive, great relationship where we work closely with many of the librarians in developing flip material, or they might see things that they bring to us. So I think on our campuses, working with the libraries is very important. They're out there working with our students as instructors, and reaching out to them, I think, is critical. How many undergrad assistants do you use, and describe their role? Typically for a class of 200, I'll have with me on any given day 2 to 4 undergraduate course assistants. So I'm mostly teaching sophomore courses, statics, dynamics, strength of materials, those types of mechanical courses. And these would be juniors or seniors. And typically they're using it as a review for the licensing exam, so they're happy to show up and follow along. And their role is to walk around, just like me, walk around, stick your nose in a group. Hey, what's going on? How are you guys? Are you getting this? What are you doing here? Ask questions, constantly try to probe. Where is the group going? Are they stuck on something? And that's their role. So they don't do any grading. They're there just to kind of walk around and answer questions and ask questions. So it's a great experience for them. And they typically either volunteer or they'll do it for 1 credit of open elective, which doesn't count towards graduation, but it shows up on their transcript. However, what they have figured out is that come senior year, they can come to my office and they know they'll get a good letter of recommendation, because in addition to talking about their performance in the program, I can talk about the responsibility that they showed in helping me out as a course assistant. So they love doing that. Sometimes in my in-class group work seems to require too much time. Yes, this is a great question, and I struggled with this. And let me reframe the question. You think you got some good problems lined up for in-class, and you get them out to the students, and boy, they're just grinding through, and you can tell that, boy, this is going to take a long time. What I've discovered is I needed to throttle back a little bit. I like to ladder the difficulty. I start with a very easy problem, something they can do in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, really easy, straightforward, kind of get everybody warmed up, right? Get back into the mode. Then we might go to a little more difficult problem. What I'll do on the next level is I'll break it up into part A and part B, and when they, say, okay, you got 3 minutes or 4 minutes to get, through part A, and a lot of times, I have to extend that. And then for more difficult problems or case studies, I really do try to chunk it, if you will. I'll break it up into pieces, and I'll work them through. And there will be groups that sometimes don't finish with Part C before they go on to Part D, and I'll work with them as much as I can. But I got to balance the overall momentum of the class. So for groups that are really struggling or something, I can work with them separately. I can ask them to come see me during office hours. And of course, eventually the solutions are available online and they can go and look at it. But there is a combination of experience, judgment, and balancing that takes place the first couple of times you flip. So that's a fabulous question. Thanks. Yeah, and so my colleague Luke Lee, good to see you on board here, Luke, and I know you're doing great work out there. Talked about some methods for doing the mini assessments for outside of class content. So I've used 2 things, and I probably should expand my horizons. Simple assessments that I can build right into Camtasia Video is little multiple choice type things. They pause the video, there'll be a little problem, really, a fairly simple problem, homework problem from the back of the book sort of thing. And they work through it and, choose an answer A through E or something like that. That's pretty simple. For longer assessments, I might have them do something that maybe after they watch the video, it might take them 30 minutes, 45 minutes to work through, a little more complicated, more steps involved and so forth. And something like that, if it's really long and I want to see how they did it, I'll actually have them do it on paper and hand it in. And yes, you're right. I can't do just-in-time teaching with that because I haven't assessed it yet. But if I do have them do something long, then oftentimes I'll just have them do it on paper and hand it in. Okay, so can you use flipped classroom style teaching in larger classes, say 100? I think the answer is yes. I will say this. I would not want to start first time in a class of 100. I think the ideal size for starting is, in that, 25 to 35 range. That just seems to be so manageable. You get to know everybody's names in the class. The distance, the classroom's smaller. It just seems to be easier. I've been doing it for 10 years, so I have a class of 200, and it's very easy for me to do. I will say that typical lecture halls are not designed well for group work and easy access. And part of a pilot study we're doing here is redesigning a 116-seat tiered lecture hall, a traditional lecture hall. We want to redesign that so that the tiers can be easily arranged into group seating. So the students can turn and face the stage when you have to do information transfer, but then they can easily pivot into groups and do group work and allow me circulation space. So I know other schools have implemented architectural changes like that. I'm excited about the possibility of doing it here, and hopefully some of you are experimenting with that now, and we'll see results published soon. So pretty exciting stuff. And how do you structure projects so that the teams can come up with a variety of different solutions and still assess them in the same way? Good question. So I'd like to address that in a couple of ways. One of the great things about having teams work on a problem is you can give them all the same problem, but change one parameter. And you actually get more information out of it than it meets the eye. Let me give you an example. In statics, I might assign a problem. And let's say there's a cable support at a given angle. And the book has the angle at 45 degrees or something. I'll make that theta. And then I'll assign one group, okay, theta is 15 degrees. The next group, it's 20, and then 25. You get the idea. I have these different angles all through. And oftentimes, there'll be multiple groups with the same angle. So what will happen is if all the groups that have 25 degrees, when they start getting their solution for the force, they can compare with each other. And if there are discrepancies, it is amazing how they themselves go back in and see the mistake. Oh, that's a minus sign. Yeah. No, I get it now. And they change it. And I'm not doing a thing. Then you take the data and you have someone go up to the board and you plot it up. And so, okay, 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, and you look at the force, and then you sit back and have a conversation with them. You say, now look at this force. It's not linear, right? It's nonlinear. So if you're really good, you can ask them ahead of time, well, if I change the angle from 15 degrees to 30 degrees, that's doubling the angle, so it's going to double the force, right? And everyone in the class says, yeah, that's right. And then you go ahead to prove that, no, that's not right. So there are tons of fun things you can do. Like I said, self-assessment in the class, I'm typically either not counting that for points, or if it is for points, they hand it in. If it's teamwork, it's handed in as teamwork, and they all get the glory or they all suffer the fate of a poor grade. Oh, here's a great question. Are you familiar with Edpuzzle? Great way to embed FA, what's the FA question? FA question? Into actual videos. Get great data. Edpuzzle. Thank you very much. I will be Googling Edpuzzle as soon as this is over to find out what that is. I'm very intrigued. Thank you very much. No, I'm not familiar, but I'm always interested in new tools that are out there. As a new engineering librarian, I'm teaching a one-credit class for sophomores and freshmen. I plan to incorporate a lot of what you said in the class, have a background in the arts and humanities, but have a strong interest in engineering and learning new things. So awesome, fabulous. What advice might you have for a newbie to teaching engineering students? Well, I mean, first of all, you sounds like you've got a great attitude and you know, you're enthusiastic and everything. So I think that the students pick up on that, and I think that's fabulous. I talked early on about just establish expectations up front and follow through. I think students really appreciate people that are organized, that follow through with what they say. And if you can, find a mentor that you can, when you're running into difficulties in the class, you can go to your mentor and say, hey, look, I'm running into this situation or that situation. And that certainly will help. But, you know, best of luck with that. And like I said, based on your question here, it sounds like you're enthusiastic. And that's one of the key things to inspiring students. How long are the pre-class quizzes? 3 questions, one being what is unclear? Yeah, great question. I don't have a set formula. When I go in, there are times when the students are all over the flip material, they're on top of it, and I can walk right in and just, everyone's good, and we can go to case studies or think, pair, share, or whatever we're doing. There are days when I walk in and I'm thinking nobody looked at the flip material because they're like clueless. So you got to be flexible. You know, a couple of minutes to the whole class can be spent. I'm much more interested in them learning the material. I'm experienced enough to make up, quote unquote, lost ground, you know, during the semester, but I don't want to plow through material and have them not know it. Certainly teaching sophomore level courses, I've got, you know, the faculty teaching junior and senior courses that are going to blame me for everything if I don't do a good job. So, so I'll take as much time as I need in order to get the assessments and to get the students on track. We'll probably end up taking a couple more questions. I think we're starting to get close on time. So here's a question. Using the flip method, we could not cover all the material in the class. Boy, that's classic, and I'll talk about that in a second. Students are used to being explained the materials, especially in slides. How should we present material to them and ask them to study it without explaining it? This is a great question. And the first concern I had when I started getting into the flipping was I wasn't going to be able to cover all the material. And that really concerned me at the beginning. And what I've found, and maybe this is just me, but when I talk to my colleagues who flip as well, they say the same thing, is that, number one, we are teaching material that perhaps is a little outdated, and we might want to just do a fresh assessment of what it is we're teaching, number one. Number two, look at the course objectives. I mean, are you teaching well beyond the course objectives, or are you focused on meeting the course objectives? So that can help guide, you know, the throttle as to where you're at. My experience has been that when I'm going through PowerPoints and just yakking on, I don't think the students are learning it. And here's why. They may be comfortable with that approach because they're used to it. But my experience has been this. I would give some PowerPoints. Boy, they were beautiful, right? Maybe some animation, maybe a solved problem that would be in there. I'd explain everything, and then maybe I would do a problem at the board. And then there would be a line at office hours out my door down the hall. And everyone would come in and say, well, Professor Pitarresi, you know, I understand how to do it, but I don't know how to start the problem. And the realization I came to is that, you know, after 30 plus years of teaching this stuff, I make an example look easy. You know, I explain it in a way that makes sense. But because the students aren't engaged, because they're simply passive and watching, they're sitting there saying, oh yeah, this is easy. This isn't hard. And then when they actually try to do it, they find out it is hard. So getting the students to realize that is I think, critical. And so coming back to the question, the question is there isn't enough time to cover the material. I have not found that to be true. I look at the content I'm teaching now flipped, and I'm actually covering more material that's more important to what they need to know. Am I covering in class some of the stuff that no, I've relegated that to a couple of videos, and realistically it wasn't on the critical path of the objectives for the course, so I'm going to let some of that go. But what I have found is that the students are actually learning and retaining the information, so that when they get to senior year and they're taking vibrations, they're remembering sophomore level dynamics and able to do extremely well in that course. And before flipping, I wasn't seeing that. So yeah, it's part of that is just getting experience. And then let's see here. We're winding down here. We're in the final couple of minutes. Do you or do you know other professors that have flipped a CAD course? Interestingly enough, a colleague here has flipped a course. And I can't. It used to be called Pro-E. I think it's called Wildfire, and now it's called Creo or something. I can't keep up with the name changes. And he actually flipped that. So the students, there is a lot of outside of class. They can watch videos and tutorials and so forth. They come into class. They work on, with the faculty and teaching assistants, we have a CAD lab, and they come in there, and that's where they're actually hands-on with the course. And I'm sure through some way here, you could contact me, and I can put you in touch with that professor, and you can kind of discuss how he did it. But I think it worked. And what is the difference between a flipped course and a project-based teaching? So, you know, there's a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of definition involved here. We have a capstone course that's project-based, and I would say that's not flipping. That's students in teams working on a project, and our course is set up so they have a faculty advisor and an industrial advisor, so they're working on industrial projects. And it's a true project course. Most of the time, the team is not engaged with the faculty or the industrial advisor. They're working on their project, and they meet once a week, you know, with the advisors to sort of assess their progress. The flip teaching I view more as moving basic information transfer out of what is normally a lecture type class so that the students are actively engaged with the material during that precious time in class when the students are face to face with us. So yeah, there's overlap, but there are subtle differences. And then last question here, I think we need to wrap it up. Do I use clickers? No, I personally don't use clickers, but many of my colleagues who flip do, and they're great. And I think flippers are absolutely fine. And oh, yeah, okay, here's the last one. For your calculus course, have you looked at incorporating Khan Academy? I got to tell you, our students are incorporating Khan Academy videos without us having to tell them. So they know where the good stuff is, and they're out there seeking this material out. Our math department developed a little bit more focused material, and the students are more than welcome to leverage Khan Academy or other resources in order to supplement their learning. So I think we're just about out of time. A huge thanks to everybody at the team for putting this together, and thank you so much for participating today.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. I just want to give you a virtual round of applause for spending time with us today and sharing some great information. And as a reminder to everyone, we have recorded today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from ACRL and Choice that will include instructions on how to access the archive version. And we will include that link and the access code, the token code for the free trial of AccessEngineering. And thanks again to all our participants for joining us. I hope you enjoyed